Manhattan Neighborhood Network, in partnership with the League of Women Voters of New York City and Gotham Gazette, is pleased to bring you Race to Represent, a MNN election initiative. I'm Ben Max, Executive Editor of Gotham Gazette. On today's program, we're bringing you interviews with two of the three candidates running for Public Advocate of New York City. The citywide special election is on Tuesday, November 5th, with the inaugural early voting period kicking off October 26th through November 3rd. Your early voting poll site is likely different from your regular poll site, so look it up before you go. The Public Advocate's Office was created in 1993 to be a check on the mayor and the rest of city government. It is the second highest ranking elected office in the city. The Public Advocate will become mayor for a brief period of time if for some reason the mayor could not serve out his or her term. The Public Advocate is a non-voting member of the City Council with the right to introduce and co-sponsor legislation. They also serve as a watchdog for city government, providing oversight of agencies and investigating citizens' complaints. They can also make proposals to address deficiencies and failures of those agencies, and the Public Advocate is meant to be a voice for regular New Yorkers. All the candidates were invited to join us, and we are joined by two of the three, Republican nominee Joseph Borelli and Libertarian nominee Devin Balkind. We hope that these interviews will give you a clear sense of these two candidates seeking to be your next public advocate and help you make an informed choice when you fill out your ballot. City Council Member Joe Borelli, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And you'll be on the Republican and Conservative Party lines for public advocate here in this election.
Correct.
So tell voters just a little background, who you are, and maybe a couple things you've accomplished in public service.
Sure. So I've been in the City Council now for 4 years. I chair the Committee on Emergency Management and Fire. Basically, I have oversight over the Fire Department in the City's Office of Emergency Management. Prior to this, I was in the state legislature representing the fine people of the 62nd District on Staten Island in Albany. And I come from the South Shore of Staten Island, which is a place I've called home for my whole life.
And a couple things you would highlight that you've accomplished in your public service. You've been in government now for a number of years.
Yeah, look, we've passed legislation to reform the election we're running in terms of debates. We've built schools, we've built parks, playgrounds, all the things that you'd expect a normal council member to do. I was number 7 or so out of 51 in number of bills passed in the council. So I've despite being a Republican, I've actually had a pretty prolific legislative career, and I'm very thankful to my colleagues in government who have been supportive.
Being sort of in the minority, being in the minority party in both Albany and the Assembly and now in the City Council, what are a couple big things that you would want to have seen done but just haven't been able to, of course, convince your Democratic colleagues to do? Are there a couple big goals where you've thought they were maybe achievable but Democrats wouldn't take them up?
No, I'm glad you asked. I mean, starting with for primarily the outer boroughs is property tax reform. I mean, we see this play out here in Manhattan with the difference between condos and rental units. But for the outer boroughs, you have extremely disparate rates of effective property taxes that people are paying, whether they live 20 blocks from one another. I mean, this is something the mayor had committed to doing, forming a commission. The commission has been months and months delayed in its reporting. And the stark reality is that we don't need a commission to actually change both the levy we levy on people in Class 1 properties or Class 2 properties or all properties for that matter. We could actually do it on our own with the state legislature and the City Council. That to me is the most stark thing that Mayor de Blasio and many of the Democratic elected officials haven't put a focus on. I suspect maybe it's because Mayor de Blasio might personally benefit from it, but I'll leave others to make that case.
Mm-hmm. So you want to be public advocate. You're running in this election to do so, to unseat Jumaane Williams, who's been public advocate since he won a special election earlier this year. Why? What's the vision?
Look, this office is one that has few duties and few powers. And I would say that our most successful public advocate was our first public advocate, Mark Green. He was abrasive, he was in your face, he was confrontational, he used the courts, he used the bully pulpit to challenge Mayor Giuliani on a lot of things he didn't agree with. And he was successful a couple of times. And having that confrontational approach, I think when you have a mayor and a public advocate that are not even of the same party and not of the same ideology by far, that actually serves the public better. The voters win when they're hearing two sides of a system. You look at every legislature in the country, and the opposition and majority system seems to work well. This mayor has no effective check on him. And what checks he does have from other elected officials tend to drag him to the left. I'm hoping to bring him back towards the center, towards moderation, towards respecting the taxpayers, towards respecting the public treasury. And if we continue to elect Jumaane Williams, I think he's only going to continue pushing him to the left.
So say a little bit more about that. You talked about property taxes. What else would be your goals for sort of the vision of the city that you would try to push the mayor on to make him more moderate, as you just said? Are there specific things related to the city treasury, related to challenges facing the city that you would really be pushing on?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you look back at what the de Blasio agenda seems to have been over the past, 5 years since he's been in office. He started off on a number of things, making significant promises, setting specific self-imposed deadlines and goals, and we see a pattern where those goals aren't met and matched. I mean, you take the homeless problem, I mean, which I'm sure will come up in every question you ask about what's a problem facing the city. But he had a self-imposed deadline and goal of building more shelter system. When you look at how they've actually handled the homeless crisis, they've done a terribly poor job. It's this type of data-driven holding the mayor's feet to the fire is what the public advocate should be doing. So you got to point out, for example, again, homelessness, the mayor's doing a horrible job of transitioning people out of the shelter system into supportive housing. I mean, you look back at Thrive New York. I mean, another campaign promise from the mayor, something he's so invested in. He put his wife as at least nominally in charge of this mental health problem. And now we've come to a point where we are only readjusting ourselves to make provisions that could possibly address the crisis of street mental illness.
You don't think, Jumaane, I mean, the issues you just mentioned, not so much maybe property taxes, but on some of these others, I've heard Jumaane Williams out there. You feel like because he is coming from the mayor's left, that's a problem, even though he's holding him accountable to some extent. I mean, he's no wallflower.
No, look, he released a report on Thrive. I mean, this is kind of the big product that he has produced in his 8 months in office. But his report on Thrive comes after the comptroller already did a report, after the city council had multiple hearings, cut the funding for Thrive, after the New York Post, the Daily News, every newspaper had done exposés, after the mayor's own management report highlighted the problems with Thrive. I mean, this is not, and I'll credit him, he only came in 8 months ago, but this is something that the public advocate should be leading on, not just picking low-hanging fruit because everyone else already discussed it.
Coming from your political philosophy, do you think city government needs to be significantly scaled back? Would you be there fighting for pretty serious reductions in the city budget, slashing of city services and programs that you deem not effective? You know, how would you sort of approach that if you were in this role?
You know, I've always been critical of programs that I've pointed out that I don't think are working. I mean, people got very mad in this year's voter guide when I pointed out the futility of just spending multiple million of dollars on a voter guide, which has, in the time the CFB has been in operation, our turnout in city elections has only gone down. Does there need to be some broad brush stroke of reducing government? No. But we need to be critical about programs that are working and when they're not. I mean, Thrive is the most obvious and probably painful example of that. And I'm proud that the Speaker of the City Council actually took the lead and trimmed their budget. I want to see a government that's more scalable to what other governments in this country are doing. When you look at the per capita spending, when you combine apples to apples of all the county, local, and education spending in all of our major cities, we are, 2 or 3 times that of Chicago. We're 2 or 3 times that of Houston, 2 or 3 times that of LA. So we're not getting a better product. We're not getting better services. In some cases, we're getting worse. So, while I don't say we should cut the budget just by default, 10% or whatever it is, we should be always looking to cut programs that aren't working. If the grass isn't getting cut in the parks, we should figure out why and maybe cut things that aren't happening.
The former public advocate Letitia James, now the New York Attorney General, she had a legal background. She made the public advocate's office into something of a mini law firm. Jumaane Williams came in. He comes from, as he says, a community organizing background. He's trying to make it more of a community organizing focus. What does a Joe Borelli public advocate's office sort of look like, and how does it operate? Well,
we're going to cut the staff down to very few people. I mean, right now, the public advocate employees, they have up to 50 or 60 slots budgeted for them. Most of those people are in their ombudsman case management role. The current public advocate's own report admitted that there's only 1,700 cases that they handled in 6 months. By comparison, the City Council handles 3,600 cases a month. The city's 311 system handles 42 million per year. So we're going to cut that staff right down. We're not going to be focused on that. People can get that service elsewhere. My public advocate's office will continue to look at data in the mayor's own management report, in other published sources, and try to hold the mayor accountable for failures, especially where there are things like Thrive, like homelessness, where he's promised to deliver results and failed in that promise. When there's a pattern of promises and not meeting those expectations, it's the public advocate's job to point those out.
So you get elected, you have 2 years, basically. This election determines who's going to hold the office for 2020 and 2021. What are some pieces of legislation you might focus on? The public advocate has the power to introduce bills. Are there longstanding bills you've had in the city council that you would want to see move through? Or are there other big goals for the city that you would really try to put on the map that aren't there now?
It's a dual role, right? I mean, there are bills I have now to reform the Office of Public Advocate. Part of the reason why I'm running is to reform that office. One of the most important things we can do is put the Department of Investigation under the purview of the public advocate, so the commissioner of DOI is accountable to that office and not the mayor's. We saw the mayor essentially fire his DOI commissioner when that person started poking around Mayor de Blasio. That wouldn't happen, and it would automatically make the Office of Public Advocate accountable and viable to the taxpayers. Big picture, I'm okay with the idea of us starting to look at how to devolve government. When you look at, again, any other large city in this country, you see there's multiple levels of government. You look at San Francisco, they have San Francisco County, San Francisco City, each has their own legislative body, each has their own executive. Services are divided. We have 5 counties with no real government combined into essentially one human, the mayor of New York. So big picture, we should as a city look to devolving governments, making borough governments, essentially county governments, more active and have more of a prominent role, having community boards that are actually responsible for making decisions that affect their community, having council members have more jurisdiction and more input on the decisions that are affecting their community.
Say a little bit more about the public advocate. You want to get the Department of Investigation under the public advocate's office. If that doesn't happen, or other tweaks and changes, that's not much of a tweak, that's a big change.
It's a big change.
But
yeah.
other things that you want to see change, you don't think the office should continue to exist?
No, look, we have talked about empowering this office for the 30 years or so that it's been in existence. And part of the reason we've talked about empowering it is because it has no effective power. So if we're not going to go in that direction, then it's a fair question, and I don't think I'm the first person to even suggest the idea of eliminating this office overall. Again, you put the DOI under the public advocate's purview, that instantaneously makes it accountable, effective, and something worth the money for the taxpayers. We can also look at putting the public advocate, as they have a seat on the City Planning Commission, on more of the boards and commissions that actually govern our life. We are governed pretty much, in some respects, more by these authorities and commissions than we are by the City Council. I mean, everything from the MTA to the TLC to the Board of Standards and Appeals, all these obscure, in some cases, bodies govern what we do, and we don't actually have an elective representative on them. Putting the public advocate on more of those, making the public advocate have an appointment on some of those, would again make this more responsive and worthwhile for the taxpayers.
So let's come back to a little bit of where we started. You're a Republican from the South Shore of Staten Island. You'll be on the Republican and conservative ballot lines in this election, as you have in many of your elections. You're an ardent supporter of President Trump, who is very popular in your district, but less so across New York City.
So I'm told.
Yes.
So I'm told.
How do you sort of reach the middle? How do you reach towards New Yorkers who are no fans of the president, don't consider themselves necessarily conservatives, but consider themselves moderates? There may be the types of Democrats even who voted for Michael Bloomberg.
Sure.
How do you square support for President Trump and wanting to reach that middle?
The fact that I supported President Trump might write off a significant percentage of people from ever voting for me, and that's fine. But there are a lot of people who believe and understand that this office is, in theory, supposed to be a check on Mayor de Blasio. And those people should respect the fact that having someone from an opposition party essentially be the opposition leader is better for our city than having anyone on the progressive side who might just be looking more to go along to get along. I have actually held my own party in check. I mean, we had this battle this year over the Zadroga 9/11 bill. And I I called my party out. I called members of my party out by name and was willing to go toe-to-toe with anyone. When President Trump does something I disagree with, I mean, there are plenty of videos out there on the internet where you can watch me do that. When he does things I agree with, there's plenty of videos out there that will show I said the same thing. So I'm happy to be independent of the White House. I mean, what I'm not happy to be independent of is what's going on at City Hall. And that's the only role the public advocate is, in theory, supposed to have. So people are going to be unhappy about my support for Trump. That's fine. They should be happy that I don't support the mayor, and I'm going to offer them an alternative.
Last question. As we look ahead, if you are elected, or even if you're not, we're going to be having a whole round of city elections coming up in just another 2 years, not even, especially with the primaries now moved to June of 2021. What sort of vision for the city do you want to see at the forefront of that election cycle? If you are elected public advocate here, you would be a significant player in that election, whether you're seeking re-election or, as you've said, running for mayor. So talk a little bit about where that should go, especially in light of what you said about your critiques of Mayor de Blasio. He will have been the leader of the city for 8 years. Sort of his footprint is really going to be solid on the city by then. Where's that shift for you? What does that look like?
I want someone, whether they're a progressive, whether they're a public advocate, Borelli running for mayor, which I said if I win this seat, I'll gladly run for mayor. I want someone to return to a focus on service delivery. We have a mayor who is actually, and in fairness, very good at being a conveyor of progressive ideology. I mean, you listen to him in that debate stage in the presidential cycle. He knows how to convey this vision of a progressive future. The guy couldn't figure out how to get people out of homeless shelters. The guy couldn't figure out how to build homeless shelters. The guy couldn't figure out how to save affordable housing, how to fix NYCHA. I want someone to return to those measures and figure out a way to have an objective statistics where we can say we're making progress or we're not making progress. Someone who does that, someone perhaps more of the Bloomberg mentality, even someone of the Giuliani cloth who wants to use data to basically quantify and measure the city's success, I want to see someone talk about that.
We're going to leave it there. City Council Member Joe Borelli, running for public advocate. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Please remember to vote. Early voting runs October 26th through November 3rd, and Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Along with the public advocate race, there are other races on your ballot, as well as 5 yes or no questions with proposed changes to the city charter. For more information on the candidates, the ballot questions, locating your poll site, and more, you can visit GothamGazette.com or the League of Women Voters website at lwvny.org. Thank you for watching. I'm Ben Max. Goodbye.